It is 3 p.m. Thursday here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to Arirang News. I'm Noaram. Thank you as always for tuning in. Now, we start with the latest on the COVID-19 outbreak in South Korea. As always, as we've been doing in recent days, concerns are mounting over a cluster of infections in the metropolitan area. The mayor of Seoul says that as of 10 a.m. today, a total of 102 people linked to a call center in the southwest of the capital have tested positive for the coronavirus. This is the largest cluster of people to have been infected in Seoul. Meanwhile, Korea CDC reported 114 new cases across the country, down from 242 new cases reported the previous day. This brings the total number of confirmed patients in Korea to just under 7,900, with 67 deaths from the virus. Now, as the virus continues to spread rapidly around the globe, the World Health Organization has declared COVID-19 a pandemic. Starting from the Chinese city of Wuhan, the virus is now spread to around 120 countries, infecting over 120,000 people. Kim Yo-sun reports.
The WHO crumbled to intense pressure on Wednesday after resisting for weeks, finally declaring the COVID-19 outbreak a pandemic, as the virus has now spread to every continent except for Antarctica.
WHO has been assessing this outbreak around the clock, and we're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction. We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
However, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the head of the WHO, stressed that the course of the pandemic could be changed if countries detect, test, treat, isolate, trace, and mobilize their people in response. He also explained that several countries have demonstrated that the outbreak can be suppressed and controlled. While he described the situation as a pandemic, Tedros stressed this does not change the agency's response, nor does it affect what countries should do to combat the virus. He also thanked measures taken by the governments of South Korea, Italy, and Iran in combating the virus, adding that, as seen in China's case, the COVID-19 outbreak is having an enormous social and economic impact. According to the WHO, a pandemic is defined as the worldwide spread of a new disease. Infections outside China, where COVID-19 originated, have now been reported in nearly 120 countries, infecting over 121,000 people around the world. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, following the Wall Street turmoil on Wednesday amid COVID-19 pandemic fears, South Korean stocks are also plunging on Thursday. As of 2:30 p.m., the benchmark KOSPI had fallen nearly 4% to 1836. At around 1 p.m., trading was halted for 5 minutes after the KOSPI's daily drop hit the 5% mark. The tech-heavy KOSDAQ also tumbled 4.7% to 567. On Wednesday, Wall Street entered into bear market territory for the first time in more than a decade due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Dow Jones plunged over 5%, which was more than 20% below its peak last month. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq also shed nearly 5% each. US President Donald Trump has announced that his country will suspend all travel from Europe to the US, with the exception of the UK, for 30 days starting Friday. He made the announcement in a televised Oval Office address Wednesday night local time. He said the EU failed to take precautions and did not ban travelers from China, adding that this, quote, seeded cluster infections in the United States. Regarding China and South Korea, Trump said Washington will keep monitoring those two countries, and as the situations improve, it will re-evaluate current restrictions and warnings and may lift them early. President Trump, in his Oval address, also announced a set of economic relief packages to help stem the fallout from COVID-19. They include low-interest loans for small businesses and payroll tax cuts. Our Choi Jung-yun has the details.
Reacting to the WHO's designation of COVID-19 as a pandemic, economic indices worldwide are flashing warning signs. Wall Street and other world markets have been plummeting, with the Dow plunging into bear market territory on Wednesday for the first time since the 2008 global financial crisis. Making matters worse, global oil prices also nosedived around 30% earlier this week after Saudi Arabia triggered an oil price war. In response, the U.S. has announced wide-ranging economic measures to combat the outbreak. Speaking to the American people directly from the Oval Office on Wednesday evening, President Trump announced unprecedented emergency actions to provide financial relief for American workers sidelined by the coronavirus.
I am instructing the Small Business Administration to exercise available authority to provide capital and liquidity to firms affected by the coronavirus. This action will provide more than $200 billion of additional liquidity to the economy.
He asked the Congress to add $50 billion to the loan and waiver program. Trump said he wanted Congress to greenlight an emergency payroll tax cut, tax relief, and waivers for American businesses negatively impacted by the outbreak. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York also announced Wednesday that it would increase its lending in short-term funding markets in a bid to calm investors' fears over the havoc taking place in the financial market. The regional Fed will increase its daily overnight repo operations to at least $175 billion, an increase from the previous $150 billion. Europe is also taking action. The Bank of England on Wednesday announced an emergency to cut its benchmark rate, slashing it from 0.75% to 0.25%. And a matter of hours after the Bank of England's decision, Britain also unveiled a $39 billion economic stimulus plan to minimize the risk of a recession caused by the COVID-19 outbreak. The European Central Bank is also pumping an extra 25 billion euros into the EU economy as well. Choi Jung-yun, Arirang News.
Now, the US has reported over 1,200 confirmed cases as of Wednesday. There have been at least 37 fatalities, including 24 in Washington state and 3 in California. In light of the outbreak, the NBA is suspending its season after a Utah Jazz player tested positive for COVID-19. The NBA said the suspension would take effect after the completion of Wednesday's schedule. In baseball, the MLB is reportedly looking into moving the Seattle Mariners' season opener against the Texas Rangers away from Seattle after the Washington state governor imposed restrictions on large gatherings. Hollywood actor Tom Hanks says he and his wife, Rita Wilson, who have been travelling in Australia, have tested positive for the coronavirus. Hanks tweeted from Queensland Thursday local time that they've had symptoms such as fatigue, aches and slight fevers. Meanwhile, in Europe, another football player has tested positive, Juventus defender Daniele Rugani. The Italian club says that so far he is asymptomatic. The first footballer to contract the virus in Europe, Hannover 96 defender Timo Hubers, currently remains in quarantine. South Korean Airlines have stopped most of their flights to Europe and the US in light of the coronavirus outbreak. Faced with a dramatic fall in demand, Korean Air says it has stopped 5 out of 13 routes to the Americas and is running only 3 out of 14 routes to Europe. Flights to those regions account for more than half of Korean Air's total capacity. The airline's president told employees this week that the situation could get worse and he couldn't guarantee the airline's survival. Asiana Airlines is also struggling. It has pulled all but one of its routes to Europe. This follows the airline's decision to temporarily suspend flights to and from Japan. Meanwhile, Lotte Duty Free at Seoul's Gimpo Airport is temporarily closing due to a dramatic fall in the number of travelers and shoppers. South Korean authorities are continuing extensive disinfection of Seoul's subway system. This comes amid mounting fears of further spread as many of the infected workers at a call center in the capital used public transport. Our Kan Young-hoo reports.
Sindorim Station, one of the busiest subway stops in Seoul, is less than 1 kilometer away from the Korea building, where a cluster transmission of COVID-19 has resulted in at least 90 confirmed cases. Seoul Metro is putting all-out efforts into stopping the virus from spreading further.
The fact that the virus has come here is tough on me. It makes me anxious. So I'm grateful to Seoul Metro for this disinfection work. Because of that, I don't think people have to worry as much about getting infected.
Disinfection teams of 4 or 5 people are constantly in the subway stations with sprayers. Other teams of 7 or 8 people clean the ticket gates, toilets, and platforms 4 to 5 times a day. Their aim is to wipe down all surfaces that people can easily touch. And it's not just the stations Seoul Metro is cleaning. Now, as you can see here, the Seoul Metro workers disinfect each subway train at least once a day to ensure the safety and health of citizens in the capital. A team of 6 to 8 people spend about 20 to 30 minutes disinfecting each train.
On top of the 637 cleaning staff we had already, we hired 106 more for the disinfection work. With our preventive measures, I think people can ride the train safely.
Seoul Metro is advising people to refrain from holding on to the straps on the subway trains if possible. Another way to protect yourself is to sit or stand apart from other people when it's not crowded. Kanyong, Arirang News.
Now, the Seoul Metropolitan Government is providing emergency financial support to young part-time workers who have lost their job due to the coronavirus outbreak. The financial aid, worth about $840 for each person, will be distributed over a 2-month period. Only Seoul residents between 19 and 34 years old who lost their jobs since January 20th can apply. The deadline for applying is next Friday. Up to 500 young people in the city will be able to receive the support. Now, following the massive infection at a call center in Seoul this week, major South Korean firms are letting their call center employees work from home. SK Telecom says that out of some 6,000 call center employees nationwide, about 1,500 of them who wish to work from home will do so starting today. LG Electronics is also preparing similar measures. Samsung Electronics, meanwhile, is reopening its maintenance service call center in Daegu on Friday. It had closed the call center for 2 weeks after 5 employees were confirmed with COVID-19. After reopening, the center said it will take measures to minimize its employees' exposure to the virus. This week, the government urged companies to have their employees work from home and to prevent them working in close proximity to each other. Now, when a colleague or neighbour tests positive for the COVID-19 virus, even those without symptoms have to be isolated as suspected patients. Now, Korean researchers have found a way to quickly test if these people are free from the virus. Park Se-young reports.
A 19-story building in Seoul was shut down and hundreds of workers had to self-isolate on Monday after a cluster of confirmed COVID-19 cases were identified at a call center in the building. For cases like this, Korean researchers have developed a method to check for COVID-19 negative people among those without any symptoms. The team created a small gene that looks for the COVID-19 virus and tested for responses at 4 parts of the virus at the same time. If all 4 parts are unresponsive, the person is COVID-19 negative. If one part is responsive, then there is a chance the subject might have COVID-19 and will require further testing. This new method differs from the current method of analyzing 1 or 2 parts of the virus to determine positivity. The new testing method can be applied at medical institutions and thousands of laboratories at universities and companies across the country.
It's an easy procedure that can be done at any laboratory, university lab, research lab, public health center, or hospital in Korea.
Because the test takes about 4 hours and the cost is about 1/9 that of a test for positive diagnosis, the new testing method is expected to reduce anxiety and help suspected patients quickly return to their normal lives. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Okay, that is all the news for this hour. Join us again at 5 p.m. for more Arirang News. Until then, goodbye.